welcome. Now, I've had a little bit of feedback. I would get a lot of feedback. But some people are arguing that I'm not doing enough jokes, and I'm instead talking much too much about politics. Now, for those people, I have a simple message. Slán. Goodbye. Away on. I happen to be the product of a 30-year conflict. I am the product of a highly politicized society. I am the product of a family where politics was the main topic at breakfast, lunch, dinner, and supper. I am interested in politics because I'm interested in ideas and I'm interested in world events. Now, I realise that's not to everyone's taste. So if you'd prefer watching boys laugh uproariously as they discuss their cocks or drugs or nonsense, there is an abundance of that already on offer. You will have no problem finding it. And I wish you bon voyage. Now, for those who remain, especially those kind people who support my wee Patreon account, I will attempt to combine comedy and commentary, as I have always done. But what follows now is most definitely, well, this falls within the commentary department. For there has never been a war in history where 80% of a country has been destroyed, 100% of its population displaced, and 50% of those killed being children. I speak, of course, of the conflict being played out in Gaza and Lebanon. And for no other reason than to head off the morons who would weigh in if I didn't state the obvious, I do not believe in the mantra from the river to the sea, nor do I support either Hamas nor Hezbollah. But to put things in perspective, from the day following the Hamas attack on October the 7th, a bus full of Palestinian children have been slaughtered in Gaza every day by the IDF. Gazan civilians have no place of safety, no sanctuary. They've been attacked in their homes, in their hospitals and in their schools. Used even in places where they've been sent after they've been displaced under UN protection. Now, it was the IDF who expelled the civilian population from northern Gaza, forcing the young, sick and elderly to walk south, promising that they would then be in a safe zone. Almost immediately, the IDF began bombing that area as well. There is now a plan, or a tentative plan, we believe, by the IDF to completely displace the last remnants of civilians from the north of Gaza by starving them out, with those unfortunates who remain being designated by the IDF as legitimate targets. We are witnessing scenes seen since the Second World War. Benjamin Netanyahu and his henchmen have broken all the conventions of war by targeting civilians using the excuse that Hamas are using them as human shields. Imprisoning thousands without trial, some of those being held mere children, with credible reports of torture, starvation within those prisons. The world has witnessed with its own eyes a man waving a white flag being shot dead by IDF snipers.
Ramzi Abu Salul was killed in southern Gaza on Monday of last week. He was one of 5 men waiting to see if Israeli soldiers positioned a few hundred meters away would let them cross battle lines to rescue relatives. A cameraman working for ITV News interviewed Mr. Abu Salul about his intentions. Then, just a few seconds later, fearful for his own safety, the cameraman stopped filming as he ran, but resumed a few seconds later. The IDF used this pause in filming to raise doubts. The video is clearly edited, they said in a statement. ITV News has now obtained another video of the shooting, and this recording is continuous. There are no breaks or edits. Here, the 2 videos are synchronized, and it's clear there was no interference or trickery during the 5-second pause in the original recording aired by ITV News. Just after the shooting, our cameraman in the pale blue protective gear shouted, "The tank fired! The tank fired!" Here you can make out the tanks to which he referred. The gunfire came from more than one weapon. In this footage, a bullet strikes the wall just above the men's heads. We showed our material to a ballistics expert who concluded after acoustics analysis that the gunfire, which continued, came from the direction of the tanks. Our cameraman is in no doubt.
While I was trying to film, I noticed many military vehicles. I kept glancing back and forth between the vehicles and the group of men. I noticed a laser beam coming from the direction of the tank. Then I heard sniper fire.
The American network ABC News was among the international broadcasters who aired our story.
And the cameraman of our partner network, ITV.
ABC were taken into Khan Yunis by the IDF at the weekend, and they asked the commander of Israeli forces in southern Gaza about the shooting of Mr. Abu Salul. The Brigadier General was forthright.
Your area of operation, waving a white flag.
Oh, you're talking about that incident?
Yeah, that incident.
We're investigating that incident.
A man holding a white flag,
Yes, I'm
unarmed, shot dead.
I'm investigating.
Those are
that.
your troops?
Yes, those are my troops, and I'm investigating that incident. That is not the way we carry out our rules of engagement. No, we don't fire at people waving white flags. We don't fire at civilians.
But you do sometimes.
We don't. Every incident that is a mistake, and there are mistakes, we are not perfect. We are in a combat zone under great threat to our people. We investigate every mistake that is done.
Asked for a comment about this interview, the IDF press office said the Brigadier General meant that his men were in the vicinity at the time and that the incident was being looked into.
And we now have medics on the ground in Gaza reporting that there are so many children being mortally wounded by shots to the head that it can only be explained as deliberate targeting by Israeli snipers. A report from the UN last week states that the IDF have perpetrated over 1,000 attacks on the healthcare sector in both Gaza and the West Bank, resulting in the deaths of 800 healthcare workers. The excuse given by Israel at the beginning of the conflict for attacking the Al-Shifa hospital, Gaza's biggest, was that Hamas had built a control centre beneath it. They even went so far as to create this graphic of what they said was beneath that hospital. Yet when their tanks and planes had pummeled the hospital to dust, no such underground structure was ever discovered. Yet the world remained silent, not holding the Israelis to account for their blatant lie. This has resulted in them continuing to use that lie for other unwarranted attacks. Not content in having bombed the Gazan health service into extinction, last weekend the IDF bombed a hospital tent camp, resulting in patients still attached to IV drips being burned alive. Emboldened by the disgraceful inaction of both the US, the UK and Europe, Netanyahu has opened up a second front in Lebanon, where his military have replicated their policy of burned earth as they level whole villages simply out of spite. This is a video filmed by the IDF of their destruction of the village of Mahib in Lebanon. That was one of the oldest villages in the country, with a shrine to the prophet Benjamin dating back 2,100 years. When the Taliban destroyed ancient sculptures in Afghanistan, they were rightly called Philistines. Yet no such international condemnation is heard when Israel does the same. Unrepentant, the IDF have announced they intend to continue their campaign of collective punishment, threatening to destroy whole villages if they are found to have any connection whatsoever with Hezbollah. The destruction of Mabhib reminded me of another village, this time in France, called Oradour-sur-Glane, which suffered a similar end, only that happened in 1944 and was a war crime carried out by the Nazi regime. Of course, nothing I have said will make one bit of a difference, but I had to say it. For those who remain silent to the genocide which is being perpetrated by Netanyahu and his generals are by their silence complicit in it. For let us be clear, the war being perpetrated by Netanyahu has nothing to do with ensuring the survival of Israel, but instead everything to do with the survival of his failed administration. His far-right cabinet see an opportunity to do what they call mow the lawn. This is a cruel metaphor for the murder of all who would oppose their draconian suppression of the Palestinian people. But the Palestinians have their own metaphor, that of the smashed watermelon. What this means is while Israel can smash the melon, in doing so, they scatter the seeds of a new generation of fighters. And the killing of Hamas leader, Yahya Sinwar, will therefore not end this conflict. Now, I will not insult the intelligence of you good people who no doubt already know all about the history of the creation of Israel. There are, of course, similarities between what is happening today in the Middle East and what was called the Troubles. What I didn't know until recently is just how close that similarity is, after I came across a quote from a man called Ronald Storrs, the military governor of Jerusalem between 1917 and 1920. He was commenting on the rationale for the Balfour Declaration of 1917, where the British announced their support for the creation of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. At that time, he said, even though the land could not yet absorb 16 million, much less 8 million Jews, enough could return to prove that the enterprise was one that blessed him that gave as well as him that took, by forming for England a little loyal Jewish Ulster in a sea of potentially hostile Arabism. And so Israel was envisaged, and so it became a little Ulster. But unlike Ulster, soon was discovered oil, and Western powers have supported Israel as a bulwark against nations such as Iran, who would disrupt the free flow of that black gold to the West. Now, over the last year, we have seen every imaginable war crime carried out by Netanyahu's homicidal regime. He has broken all the conventions of war and used collective punishment, torture, starvation, and the murder of health workers and journalists. Yet he continues to be armed by both Biden and Starmer. Such is his confidence. He's even attacked UN forces stationed on the border of Lebanon. Can you imagine for a second what the response of the US would be if it had been Putin rather than Netanyahu who sanctioned such attacks? The main UNIFIL base under attack is manned by, would you believe, soldiers from Ireland, who instead of being bullied into leaving by the IDF, were given a traditional Irish rebuff, and they were told to off. All we need now is for those other democratic nations who purport to live by the rule of law to find again their conscience and stop this rogue state. For unless Israel wants continuous conflict, the day will have to arrive, as it did here, when competents sit down and talk. And when that occurs, the only possible solution will be the creation of two states, both recognized and defended under international law. Sadly, there is no chance of this happening so long as Benjamin Netanyahu puts his political survival above the survival of the 100 Israeli hostages still being held by Hamas in Gaza.